Hello and welcome. It's a two-way street. The West fears Islam and Islam fears the West. The rift that's being created between the two in the post-9/11 era is one that the Obama administration is trying to address with a far greater outreach than its predecessor. But what's the best approach? Well, terms like radical, militant and terrorist have become synonymous with Muslims to those living in the West. And in the Muslim world, America has become synonymous with double standards and hypocrisy. With the Western world waging two full-scale wars in the Muslim world and with the stagnation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the stakes couldn't be higher. So today we ask, are the two sides really engaging with each other? And what are the barriers to better understanding? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments, and we also welcome your phone calls on the show. My guest today is a longtime analyst of Middle East affairs who spent years living there. He's Juan Cole, a professor of history at the University of Michigan, who maintains an influential blog on American foreign policy in the Muslim world. It's called Informed Comment. Professor Cole has just published Engaging the Muslim World, which focuses on the Bush administration's policies towards Muslims in the post-9/11 era and how the Obama administration might be able to fix them. Professor, good to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Riz.
Well, you're stirring things up, bringing this debate into the open, and it's a very valuable one. It's interesting to note when that now the U.S. president, current president Barack Obama, seems to be coming up with some positive moves when it comes to engaging Muslims. And apart from the fact he used the word Muslim for the first time in a presidential inauguration speech, recently he's been reaching out in a much more positive way. And let's listen in before we get to this discussion on this. Let's listen to what he said to Iran on the new year, the Nowruz.
So in this season of new beginnings, I would like to speak clearly to Iran's leaders. We have serious differences that have grown over time. My administration is now committed to diplomacy that addresses the full range of issues before us and to pursuing constructive ties among the United States, Iran, and the international community. This process will not be advanced by threats. We seek instead engagement that is honest and grounded in mutual respect.
Sounds very positive. He used the word Islamic Republic of Iran, which again tacitly recognizes the revolution. He talks about engagement in effect by saying that the administration has a different approach. In your opinion, looking at what you've written about engaging the Muslim world, how well is he engaging?
Well, President Obama's way of speaking to the Muslim world is admirable, and I think he's choosing his phrases very carefully, and it is making a good impression. But I think that most people in the region want to see change. They want to see what concrete steps he's going to take to change the relationship.
It's still early days, though, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult to turn around what many see as 8 years of counterproductive relationships.
Yes, of course. The United States is, as you said, involved in two wars in the Muslim world, and it has other kinds of commitments and engagements of a controversial nature throughout the region. It is sending predator strikes on Pakistan, and the the Palestinian-Israeli relationship is not going well. But I think there is, a mixture of hope and skepticism.
You've to some degree become quite controversial, in political circles in America. Why is that? How have you upset them?
Well, I've spoken my mind. I think it has been suggested by some observers that there's a fairly close-knit policy establishment in the United States. Although it's a big country, very few Americans spend a lot of time on foreign affairs. And so in New York and Washington, there are orthodoxies. And I've been critical of Israeli policy in the West Bank and Gaza. That's a stance that most American politicians avoid taking. And I've also insisted on a clear-eyed realism in looking at the region. It's a region that I have long experience of, and I read the languages. Right. And so I won't join in with the glib kind of talk that you hear here in Washington often.
You have basically direct understanding of the languages, which obviously gives you a better insight, I guess. But I wonder, to what extent is the problem that there's been what some see as a silenced majority in Islam, and it's difficult for those with good intentions to find the right Muslims with whom to engage?
Well, no, I really would resist this idea that the Muslim world lacks interlocutors of goodwill. Obviously, some countries in the region are very authoritarian, and so there's not much of a civil society, and you're destined to deal mainly with the government. But there's a very lively civil society in places like Egypt and Jordan and Turkey, with which the United States can engage if it so desires.
We've got a caller on the line from Dubai. John, what would you like to ask? Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I only would like to make a comment saying that the Muslims in America and worldwide are waiting for practical steps from the U.S. administration and President Obama. What he's doing at the moment is only protecting or making an impression that he's not against Muslims as opposed to his predecessor, George W. Bush. But in reality, he's not taking practical steps in forging a strong relationship with the Muslim community in the United States and worldwide, and we're not seeing any difference from how it was before. For example, just an example of how it could be reflected on Muslims. What we go through when we visit the United States or airports is we are being harassed constantly.
Okay,
and
John, let me put this to the professor. I mean, this is an interesting point. Of course, that experience at the border, which I get regularly, is one aspect of it. But John in Dubai is making a valid point. We've said, true, President Obama hasn't had long yet, but what concrete steps could he take, in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the more important is a firm commitment to withdrawal of troops from Iraq. This is something that he campaigned on in the presidential election. It is something that is called for in the status of forces agreement passed by the Iraqi parliament. And he has committed to this process pretty firmly. Opinion polling shows that that's one of the major bones of contention between the Muslim worldwide community and the United States. So I think this is a place where he is taking practical steps, and they are likely to produce good results.
Is there anything, though, that, I mean, that's already been to some degree set in stone or set in paper, than many people hope is set in stone. But is there anything else he could do visibly that would build the confidence that would stop viewers saying, well, look, he's promised a lot, but he hasn't done anything?
Well, I think that some of the things that he could do, which would make a very good impression in the region, will be difficult for domestic political reasons. So, for instance, it is shameful that the Israelis have a blockade on the civilian population of Gaza. The evidence is that not enough food is even coming in to feed the children, and children are half the population of Gaza. Were President Obama to find a way to lift that blockade, and to have it be known that he did so, I think it would be a gesture that would be received with enormous gratitude in the region. But it's a really tough thing to pull off.
We had an email that came in from Concord in California, and Georgie Menard wrote in saying, the war in Afghanistan is not winnable because we are not really out to assist the people there, but to control them. Furthermore, our meddling in Pakistan and our continued support for Israel, despite that country's human rights abuses, does not help our cause. Now, you've mentioned there, of course, he could make take some positive steps there. But to what President Obama has said he's going to focus much more on Afghanistan and has grouped the Afghanistan and sort of India-Pakistan region much more comprehensively. Is that beneficial in showing that there's a will to change things there?
Yes, I have a chapter on Pakistan and Afghanistan in the book, and my take on what, first of all, I think it's very early days to make a judgment on President Obama's Afghanistan policy. He's doing a major policy review. According to leaks in the press, he's pressed the generals that what is the end game here? What is the objective? When could it be achieved? How could it be achieved? Those are good questions, and so I think the sending of the 17,000 troops recently, which will begin in May, was for the purpose of enabling the August elections, and it really doesn't tell us very much about strategy.
Let's talk about something that you refer to in the book. You talk about Islam anxiety in the West and America anxiety in the Muslim world. And I wonder, how widespread do you believe fear or negativity towards the U.S. to be among Muslims?
Well, the opinion polling in the Muslim world about the United States is very clear on this issue. There's a great fear that the United States wants to divide the Muslims against themselves. There's also a fear that the United States is actively working against Islam as a religion, that somehow it wants to convert them to Christianity and so forth.
Do you get a sense of anger in the Muslim world towards the West, or is it just apprehension?
There's anger towards policy.
Right.
You know, it's often said in the United States by politicians that they hate our way of life. This is simply not true. All of the polling and personal experience would tell you this as well. They like the American way of life. They think democracy is compatible with Islam, but they really dislike some American policies, especially on the Israel-Palestine side, Iraq, and as the email showed, Afghanistan is also raising anxieties.
How much does it frustrate you as being someone who has lived in the region, speaks the languages, knows it very well, to come back to America and see the misperceptions and misunderstandings here?
Oh, well, it is tragic. I turn on my television and I see these clowns parading through, and it's flashed up under them, Middle East expert, and you know, they know no languages, they haven't any long experience of living in the region, and then they say the most ridiculous things, and they're actually paid well to do this. I think the mass media it really has fallen down on the job with regard to reporting the Middle East. And this is not to say that there aren't very fine correspondents with long experience out there who do their best. But a lot of the people they bring on in Washington and New York, our commentators, really have no business being there. After 9/11, the press would start to call me. They would say, "We understand you're a terrorism expert." And at first I would say, "No, I'm a Middle East historian. I know about the region." And they would hang up. And after a while, I figured out that they wanted me to say I was a terrorism expert. And then I saw all the other people that they brought, they flashed up terrorism expert under their name. So I started saying yes.
Right. Professor, we've got more questions, so we're going to take a very short break here. More of our discussion with Professor Juan Cole in just a moment. Don't forget, as we take a break, you can join our conversation in the live station chat room. The debate's taking place there, and we'll be right back.